What is going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I wanted to take a look at the Ottawa Redblacks, just in general as a franchise, on the heels of a huge 37-19 collapse at the hands of the BC Lions on Saturday night, and take a look at the recent history of the team and the struggles that they've had. So first, I want to take a look at just their history in general since they came back into the CFL, and then I'll go into more specifically their 2023 season. Now, starting off, their first season was in 2014. Brand new expansion franchise after the previous franchise in Ottawa had folded years before, the Ottawa Renegades. So the Redblacks come into existence in 2014, have that typical first expansion season, go 2-16, looks pretty rough, but the next couple of years look very promising for the Redblacks. So in 2015, they go 12-6. They lose in the Grey Cup to Edmonton. So things are looking up. They got Henry Burris, kind of getting the last good football that he has in him. Actually won MLP with the Redblacks during his time there. So things are looking good for the Redblacks. Then you go to 2016. The record drops a lot here. They go 8-9-1 on the season, so a losing record, but that is good enough for first in the East, and actually they ended up winning the Grey Cup that year in a massive upset over the Calgary Stampeders. So within 3 years, this franchise wins its first Grey Cup, great momentum behind the franchise, and everything is looking up. Now in 2017, they also make the playoffs, but they lose in the East semifinal to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They go 8-9-1 that year as well. So back-to-back years with a tie there, and I believe both of those games were against Calgary. Calgary and Ottawa played some great games over that time period. So by the time we get to 2018, this is when Henry Burris is no longer with the organization. Actually, that may have been after 2016 when they won the Grey Cup. But in 2018, Burris is far gone from the organization. But they still have Trevor Harris as their quarterback, and he's playing at a relatively high level for them. They go 12-6 in 2018. They get all the way to the Grey Cup again for the third time in 4 years, and they lose to the Calgary Stampeders, who get the better of them after losing in 2016. So I think at the end of the day, just such a great run there in those next 4 years after that initial expansion season. So within 5 years, you have 3 Grey Cup appearances and 1 Grey Cup title for the Redblacks as an expansion franchise out of the gate. I don't think the owners, Jeff Hunt, who brought the franchise back to Ottawa, could have envisioned a better start for the franchise than that. But then what's happened since has been an absolute disaster for the Redblacks, and I think it starts with the 2019 offseason. So down here on the board, I have 4 players that they lost during the 2019 free agency period that I think still haunt them today. I think some of these players, a little bit older by today's standards, but back in 2019 were still at the top of their game and some of the best players in the CFL. Of course, you have quarterback Trevor Harris, who leaves to go to Edmonton. That didn't really work out for him, but it's worked out better for him since than it has for the Redblacks. Wide receiver Greg Ellingson also follows Trevor Harris to Edmonton. He was their go-to guy, arguably, for the Redblacks over those first handful of years with Brad Sinopoli, Chris Williams, and other guys. And then Sir Vincent Rogers, left tackle. I think he was arguably the best left tackle in the league, up there with a guy like Stanley Bryant at his peak. And then William Powell in the backfield was also a very, very productive running back. He leaves to go to Saskatchewan. So those 4 guys in the period of one offseason leave this team. And so going into the 2019 season, this offense is a shell of its former self. They have Dominic Davis at quarterback, and Dominic Davis still around in the league today, but we know that he's just not a starting caliber quarterback from what we've seen from him in the CFL, and that was what happened during the 2019 season, where they go 3-15. Interesting enough, they actually go 2-0 to start that year. Big dramatic victory against Calgary the first week of the season. Forget who they won against in the second week of the season, but just a complete collapse after that. They go 1-15 the rest of the way and ultimately secure the worst record in the CFL in 2019. Now, of course, 2020, we have the pause, and then we come back in 2021. They go 3-11 this time with a brand new head coach. You have, of course, Rick Campbell, who was the original head coach who lasted from 2014 to 2019. He's no longer there. They have Paul LaPolice, who takes over, the former offensive coordinator for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but he doesn't fare much better. He goes 3-11 in 2021, and ultimately brings in Matt Nichols at quarterback, who gets injured. They have to start Caleb Evans, a true green rookie, at some points during this season, and ultimately it just doesn't look pretty for the Ottawa Redblacks that entire 2021 season. But back after the 2021 season, there was a lot of excuses going around because it was a first year under a new head coach. The quarterback situation was a mess. Let's see what they can do with the full offseason under their belt in 2022 to see if they can right the ship. Well, they bring in Jeremiah Masoli and a bunch of other players. They were the most active team in free agency during the 2022 offseason in anticipation of getting that team up to speed, but unfortunately, it just didn't work as well. So they go 4-14. Jeremiah Masoli, of course, gets injured after the 4th game of the season. That dirty Garrett Marino hit, unfortunately, and the season just goes by the wayside after that. Now, so far this season, I have 3-9 on the board, but I wrote up this board before the loss this weekend, so they're actually 3-10 on the season now. So ultimately, it has not gotten better this season, but let's take a look at their 2023 season in more detail here. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, 3-10 so far on the CFL season, heading again towards being one of the worst teams in the CFL, if not the worst team yet again. But starting in week 1 was their first game, and it looked pretty promising. They put up a really good fight against the Montreal Alouettes on the road. This was a game that Nick Arbuckle started at quarterback because he was the initial number 2 quarterback going into the season, with Jeremiah Masoli injured to start the year. But Arbuckle, just the first couple games of the season, did not inspire any confidence, and he hasn't really done that throughout the last several appearances he's had as a CFL starter, going back to his time with Edmonton, Toronto as well. So I think, that was a close loss there, week 1 against Montreal. They showed a lot in terms of the defense, but I think in terms of the offense, just a lot of the same story, and I think most of this can get blamed the last 4 years, I think, on the offensive side of the ball and their inability to solve that quarterback position and the overall, playmakers on that offense. Now, week 2, Arbuckle starts again. They lose 26-15 at home against Calgary in a very winnable game. They lose by 11 points there, but I mean, if their offense could do anything in that game, they had a goal line stand that they failed to punch in the end zone. So the offense just could not get anything together those first couple of weeks, and Nick Arbuckle was rightly benched for the 3rd week of the season. Well, actually in week 4, because week 3 they had a bye week. So week 4, when they come back after the bye week, they make a quarterback change, and they start promising young quarterback Tyree Adams in a win against Edmonton, 26-7. Tyree Adams looks very, very promising, brings a lot more athleticism to the table than a guy like Arbuckle did. But unfortunately, late in that game, Jake Serezna, defensive lineman for the Edmonton Elks, slides into the knee of Tyree Adams, torn ACL. He's out for this season after just 1 game. Just very, very tragic. I think, it's hard to imagine what the season would have looked like from that point on if Adams was able to carry on and be the starting quarterback, or at least grow as the starting quarterback as the season went along there. But by the time they get back in week 5, after Adams gets injured in week 4, Jeremiah Masoli is actually ready to start for this team. So remarkably, 3 starting quarterbacks in the first 4 games of the CFL season in 2023 for the Red Blacks. So Masoli starts this game in week 5, but we all know what happened as CFL fans. He gets injured in the first quarter against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Actually, may have been the beginning of the second quarter, but regardless, very soon after he enters his first game, he gets injured, and it's an Achilles injury. He's out for the season, and it's hard not to wonder if that is the last time we'll see Jeremiah Masoli on a CFL field, unfortunately. Just the back-to-back season-ending injuries, the fact that he had a season-ending injury back in 2019 with Hamilton. So, I mean, just my thoughts go out for Jeremiah Masoli still with that big injury that he suffered in week 5 of this season. So, the Red Blacks, awful luck. Back-to-back weeks lose their quarterback for the season in Tyree Adams and Jeremiah Masoli. So after Masoli gets hurt in that week 5 game against Hamilton, Dustin Crum has to come into action. He has never played in a CFL game before, and he looked pretty good. He actually led the Red Blacks very competitively in that game. Got them down to a position that they could have got a game-tying drive, but unfortunately they get tackled at the goal line on the last play of the game. They lose 21-13, but you're feeling decently, considering the situation if you're a Red Blacks fan from what you saw from Dustin Crum in that first action. Now, in terms of his first start, the hype gets out of control here. They win in shocking comeback fashion against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in overtime, 31-28, in just absolute crazy game. I think probably the craziest game we've seen in the CFL this season, given that the Red Blacks have otherwise been arguably the worst team in the CFL this season, and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have been the best team in the CFL over the past 3 years or so. But Ottawa comes out with a victory there, their second victory of the season, to go to 2-3 on the season. So, I mean, positive signs there for the Dustin Crum in his first career CFL start. But the next week against Calgary, they also have a dramatic victory here, and there's some real positive momentum behind this organization. They win 43-41, another overtime game, back-to-back overtime games, and I think that's the first time ever that a CFL team has won back-to-back overtime games in CFL history. So, pretty remarkable. You even have a win streak here for the Ottawa Redblacks. They go to 3-3 on the season, and things are looking up. But that's really the last of the positivity on this board here. So, week 8, they lose 16-12 at home against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That's been a continuing storyline over the past couple years. The Ticats have not lost against the Redblacks since 2018 in the East Final, where Trevor Harris threw 6 touchdown passes. So, I mean, that's just a major problem when you cannot win your divisional games. And, of course, they've struggled against Toronto and Montreal over this time period as well. Week 9, they lose 26-24 at Saskatchewan in a very, very close, contested game. I really thought Dustin Crum and company were going to pull that one out. I actually picked them to win that game, but unfortunately, they could not get it done, and they lose their second straight there. Week 10, they lose a very competitive game at Toronto, 44-31. I thought that was arguably the best the Red Blacks offense had looked the entire season, other than that game against Calgary. So, I thought that was a positive sign. Even though they had lost 3 straight, I thought they could still pull themselves out of the mess. And then week 11 happens. This is a game I actually attended in Ottawa, Montreal versus Ottawa. And Ottawa had a huge lead throughout this game, and ultimately right down to the final 4 minutes or so. But Montreal, led by Caleb Evans, their backup quarterback, leads an 11-point comeback victory in the final 4 minutes on the road in Ottawa. And they win 25-24 over the Red Blacks. So, just a crushing defeat for the Ottawa Red Blacks in a game that they really had to have against a divisional opponent. They still have not won a game against a divisional opponent this year. All 3 games that they've won have come against the West, and that's a theme of their season. They played much better against the West than they have against the East. Now, week 12 is arguably the most disappointing loss on the board here. They lose 30-20 on the road in Edmonton. Edmonton, of course, has that 22-game home losing streak, but they snap it here against the Red Blacks in pretty convincing fashion. This game really wasn't that close. Edmonton wins it. Ottawa continues their losing streak into their bye week in week 13. And then week 14, they lose again to Hamilton, 27-24. A game that went back and forth in the fourth quarter, but Ottawa once again cannot close out against Hamilton. They've had several close games against Hamilton, but they cannot close a game out against Hamilton this year and ultimately get swept again in the season series. And then finally, there's the game that we just saw this weekend, which was an absolute complete collapse. BC was down in this game 37-18 at home against the Red Blacks. The Red Blacks looking to get a huge victory. I'm thinking about how they're going to get back in the playoff race, the mathematics of it. But I think at the end of the day, just the collapse that we saw from the Red Blacks in that game, they ultimately end up losing 41-37. They led by 10 points with a minute and a half left, and they give up a big missed field goal return. They probably shouldn't have even kicked that field goal in that situation. Probably should have punted, kept them, deep, made them march the full length of the field, but ultimately they get burned by the missed field goal return, and they get the ball back for another possession, and they ultimately have to punt it away, and BC ultimately gets the game-winning touchdown. So just absolute craziness in that game, one of the craziest games we've seen in the CFL this season, but ultimately the Red Blacks once again on the wrong end of it. And I think at the end of the day, 3-10 on the season. You look at their previous 3 years, just so disappointing, and just there doesn't seem like there's any hope with this organization right now. I've compared it to the Tiger Cats of the early 2000s when they had that 1-17 season, several really struggling seasons in a row. I think they missed the playoffs 5 years in a row in the CFL, which is really, really hard to do, considering 6 of the 9 teams make it. Back then, 6 of the 8 teams made it. So, I mean, I don't know what you would do if you're a Red Blacks fan right now. You got to keep the hope, I guess, but I think at the end of the day, just a really rough situation in Ottawa, and hopefully they can get this turned around soon, because there's also an economic aspect to it with the declining attendance just from all the losing. We saw that in Edmonton. We're seeing that now in Ottawa. So hopefully they can get it turned around soon and give their fans something to cheer about. But ultimately, that is just the end of today's video, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and let me know what you think about the Ottawa Redblacks going forward, their future in the CFL. How do they get this ship turned around? But with that said, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.